Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, Kim Seltzer, a dating and makeover expert, where I will help you build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. So you're on a date. Okay, just picture this. And you exchange pleasantries, you fire off questions about how your day was and details about your jobs. And it's a friendly conversation. It's going well. And maybe there's some occasional smiles and polite laughs. But after 45 minutes, there's this awkward silence and then a period of awkward silences. And your date seems, well, a little disconnected, uninterested, answering anything and everything with one word. Yeah, right, great. And they literally start yawning in your face. And you quickly try to revitalize things by inserting some jokes you heard maybe that your friend said, or like you draw it out of your hat because you know that that usually gets a laugh. And you tell a million times like you're a floundering comedian and things just flatline. And in the end, your date says, "It was so nice meeting you, and perhaps you can maybe be friends." Those dreaded words, "Let's be friends." But wait for it. And then you hear on top of it, "I just didn't feel the chemistry." Right? This is a common theme that happens a lot to a lot of the clients that I work with. And you might even realize that there's a familiar pattern of you having boring dates and always ending up in the friend zone. And you understand that the importance of learning how not to be boring is important. I mean, it's important to you, but it's hard to know how to get around that, get over it, and just have the dates feel fun. I remember when I was doing this flirt workshop, it was about a year ago, and this was the big immersion flirt workshop that I had where I had people go on a mock date in front of everybody. And what was so interesting, I mean, these people didn't know one another and they started bantering. And I think the woman in the date had this little rubber ducky in the back of her screen, and her quote unquote date was talking about the rubber ducky. And so they had this whole date around the rubber ducky and they were having fun and they were laughing. And so when the date was over, I asked, the audience or the people in the workshop, what did they think of the date? And most people thought it was cute and fun. And there was this one woman who said, that was the most painful, horrible date I've ever seen. I said, wow, really? Like what was bad about it? And she's like, well, they didn't really talk about anything. They didn't really get to know each other. They didn't like exchange information. And it was a big kind of aha moment for her when I really highlighted the fact that, what was hard for her about flirting and dating was exactly why it was uncomfortable for her to watch that date. Because then when I asked the two people, how did they feel in the date? They said, that was the best date I've ever had. And most people enjoyed it because really at the end of the day, it wasn't about the facts that were being exchanged. It was the playfulness. It was the feelings that got solicited on the date. And for that woman who was uncomfortable, she had a huge breakthrough and realized that she was leading every date with what she did for a living, all the activities that she was trying to impress upon with the guy. And once she got it, a lot of the stuff, around her perception of what a good date was completely changed. And she ended up having really playful, fun dates. Now, it took some coaching and it took some practice, but here's the thing. What people mistakenly think is that they will focus on the facts, like that woman, and the lines that they're going to say on the date. And you can be friendly and you can kind of shoot the breeze with somebody. But what happens is that there's not enough focus on the feelings. And at the end of the day, what makes someone feel attracted and connected to you is based on how they feel when they're around you. So it's not about the facts, it's about the feelings. And the name of the game is learning how to do this, of course, with practice, working on delivery of your conversations, and really breaking out of your routines. Not being boring all comes down to saying yes to more opportunities and experiences And the more times you say yes, the more excitement and fun you invite into your life. That will break up that monotony of sometimes those, boring, dry conversations. And maybe you're too stuck in a routine or you lack the mindset of spontaneity. And then that comes across in a way that you talk about your life. And if you ever met a person who seems excited about life, like notice their excitement in their body, their voice when they're saying it. So it's not even the content, but it's the delivery of it because they're filled with so much happiness, purpose, adventure, excitement, spontaneity, and wonder in their lives. And this isn't to say that, any kind of routine is bad. I'm not saying that, but it is, if it's making you boring, then maybe your predictable and boring pattern of everyday life has worn you down and left you jaded or even fearful that your ideas are even interesting. So you hold back. And when you're a boring person, I'm just going to say this, not only will you scare off your date, but it will hinder you from living your best life. So, with me on the line today is a gentleman who I met recently in one of my workshops. And I'm so happy he is coming on because he's so awesome. He's so open. He's an amazing, sexy voice when you hear it. And he struggles though with feeling like a boring guy on dates, which often puts him into the friend zone. So I'm excited to help him uncover what is going on and perhaps infuse a little fun and flirtiness in his interactions. Welcome, Dustin. Are you there?
Here I am.
See, isn't that a sexy voice, y'all?
I do my best.
Yeah, and see, you don't even try. And that's what's so like amazing to me that you're having these issues, I will say, especially with your voice. But we will dig into that. So anyway, just tell us a little bit about you and kind of what's going on in your dating life and some challenges you're having in this area, and then we can kind of talk through it.
Well, thank you so much, Kimmy, and I just want to say how glad I am to be here. It's really just a wonderful opportunity to have this kind of a conversation, kind of a dialogue with you, with all your insight and experience with this. Um, a little bit about me. I'll try to keep it short. I'm 43. Am I am single. I
Ready to mingle. Yes.
exactly, and yeah, what so many of the things that you brought up in the introduction are just are so relevant to my life and my experience. I am one of these people who, like you were saying, I struggle with being, um, I guess, somewhat boring, somewhat predictable. I was always the nice guy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that you can't have the boredom and the predictability along with it. Some things that just come a little bit more naturally to certain people with attraction haven't come to me that naturally. So, for many years, I would say, my teens and college years and my 20s, I would just say, well, this is just ridiculous. Everyone says I'm so great. Uh,
Hmm.
not to sound cocky. But yeah, I got into a pattern of either not getting dates or going into dates or even getting into relationships that I immediately ended up being very unhappy with or was just and ended up needing to get out of or was was broken up with, which was actually for the better. I later on found out, and then I would just be that passive, boring person, and then wonder why people would get bored of me or why I was, attracting women who at first I thought were great because wow, they're willing to go out with me, and then I would wonder, why either they would get bored of me or they really
Mm.
turned out to be very controlling and possessive and having a lot of the qualities that I really was hoping to not stumble upon. So fast forward into my 30s, the late 20s into 30s, I got burnt out from it and really like you mentioned, can we get into that period of well, okay, I'm just gonna stay away from it, I'm gonna hold back
Mhm.
and isolate, not to use an overly used term in these days and day and age, but isolate and kind
Mhm.
of thumb my nose at the system, which is, literally being a rebel without a clue about how to handle it. And and then finally, I realized that there's so much out there that there are so many people out there. I'm not the only one. There are people out there that are working to help themselves and others willing to work with them, in ways that are very constructive and positive. And, as I got back into knowing that I tried some online dating in the last couple of years. I've been out on a couple of times. And while I'm glad to be back in that spot where I'm at least willing and able to do that, it still always kind of ended up in the same way. Either, there wasn't a chemistry, or I thought there was and she didn't, or, I just I would feel drained at the end of dates just because I sat there just trying to spark some chemistry, and I was,
Mm.
that's a long story short. I'm sure we'll find more to bring into it as the conversation flows, though.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, that was such a beautiful summary. And thank you for sharing all that. And it is interesting how things like kind of form over time. You had mentioned something as you were first sharing your story. You said in your teens, was there a period of time where you were a little more like fun and vivacious and outgoing, that kind of thing? Or has this always been hard for you?
I've gone through periods where I was a little bit more vivacious, excuse me, and outgoing.
Hmm.
Definitely a little bit more, I would say, in college. In my, meaning my late teens, early 20s, and in high school and junior high school, I was really quite shy and quite aloof.
Ah.
I was, I'm an only child. I don't want to get into too much, psychobabble, but I'm an only
Oh, that's
child.
what we do here, though.
Yeah, and I know you're a therapist, so this is probably
What's
be relevant for you too.
psychobabble? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. It's relevant. So I am an only child. When I was growing up, I really, I had another first cousin who was my age, who I would see sometimes, and I went to pre-K. I spent time around other children growing up, but just never related to them all that well. And I think that kind of, that definitely could have set a tone for, you know, failing to really be in on all the social cues that somebody would need to be in as they were growing up to really make good
Mm.
friendships and good, good romantic connections too, starting in, I don't know, whatever, elementary school, and then, and then progressing. I didn't follow that trajectory that a lot of
Mhm.
people do, and it always kind of just bewildered me. So,
Yeah.
so in college, I was definitely college in my 20s. I took I was more outgoing. I did a lot of traveling in my 20s. I lived overseas and really just took a lot of different steps to try to get out into the world and figure out what else was out there. Am I missing something? Am I, what I found was really the same problems that were facing me, where I was living and as I was growing up. When I would go to other places and meet new people, especially in the area of, trying to find dates or keep
Mhm.
attraction when it was sparked, the same thing would happen, whether it was in the United States or the Czech
Oh.
Republic, or everywhere else
Uh-huh.
I was.
There was no
Um,
escape.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so I always, I would say I definitely have a better sense of humor now. I do have the capacity to, to be playful, especially if I get a little bit of reciprocity, in terms of carrying it.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes I met somebody and had a great conversation with them, and there was that kind of playful spark, and unfortunately, it just never progressed, or it was a situation where we weren't in the same place and we just wasn't able to continue. And that's something that led me to say, okay, I know that there's something there's something back there. I need to know how to tap into it better, if
Mhm,
that makes
mhm.
sense.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, going back to the psychobabble stuff, but it is
No,
important, I
no,
think it's
I shouldn't have
related.
called it that.
But
It's very relevant.
it's good, it's I say it all the time here on the podcast,
I meant it from a place of humor.
and
That's
right,
all, not
it's right.
condescension.
But that was so boring, Dustin. No, I'm just kidding.
I
Um,
love it.
see,
I love it.
this is how a date should feel.
Exactly.
Um, when you were young, and I mean, we don't have to get into it too much, but just like in your family system, like I get like the social kind of aspect of it, but like in your family system, was there this sense that you could play, and what was, stuff going on there?
Yeah, there definitely was.
Mhm.
You know, I there were there were there was a couple of people who I felt really comfortable enough around to really play like that, and they were children of my parents' friends, and they're
Mm.
wonderful, and I'm still in contact with most of them, and they're still wonderful. Um, and there was always a couple of times where we going out on the playground in elementary school, and we would have a good time, but then there were other times when just because I was like the the kind of the shy fat weird kid, I was just kind of off on my own, or avoiding people because of how they
Ah.
would treat me. And but yeah, there was play with with my first cousin who I told you about, and
Mhm.
even with a couple of key people who I met in school that really did turn out to be good friends. And yeah, in my house, I mean, I grew up in, I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the early 80s. It was different. We were allowed to play. I was allowed to,
Yeah.
it's much different. They didn't have the kind of helicopter parenting that there was now. So my parents really never gave me all that many limitations. And I never really, which was great because it gave me that freedom. But I also never, I never really felt like I had to fight and rebel and be all that bold. So yeah, I didn't
Mhm.
develop certain instincts of having to do that I need, that maybe could have countered that shyness and that sort of that tendency to keep things a little bit just kind of steady and predictable, so.
Yeah, well, and I think, what I'm hearing too is that it really started from within and how you saw yourself,
Hmm.
and I just wondered that, where it was set early on, that
Sure.
you were worried about what other people thought or felt, and you put more focus and emphasis on that versus just letting go and being you, and not worrying
Sure.
about the rejection and all that stuff.
Sure.
And what happens, like, over time, is that you just learn to do that, because there's a sense also, if you think about it, when you're doing that, there's a sense of control.
Oh
And when
yeah.
you're feeling out of control in some ways with the silliness or letting go because you're worried about how that'll be perceived, then it's easier just to be predictable and in control. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, because sometimes I would try to break out of that shell, and then but it was because I was trying to force it. So
Yeah.
the other kids around me in my classroom or on the playground are just like, oh God, he's just being so weird. What is wrong with him? Or
Mm,
or in other instances where I would if I were in a situation where, especially where my parents were around, but I was around other children, I would feel, I felt a lot of pressure to try to change myself to get myself to be more social and accepted to them, because I guess it was a thing. One of the things with, especially with my dad, and I don't want to, turn this into a, blame your parents thing, but he always wanted me to be more social and have more friends, and didn't like it that I was a
oh.
loner, and it was always I knew that he was kind of watching me when I was around other kids, because he would give me feedback on what he saw, and I realized that he meant well doing that, but it
Hmm.
it it, it put me into this kind of position where I felt like, okay, people are watching me now, and if I want his approval, um, then oh, I really better look like I'm having a good time playing with these kids, you know?
Justin, that's
So,
huge what you just said
yeah,
just
yeah.
now. Like, do you see how that dynamic might be also intertwined with how you approach women? And
Definitely, because
Mhm.
I want them. I would say, okay, I have to make sure that I look, I put up a good appearance, and I'm using
Yep,
the right words and getting the right responses, and just making everything be the way it should instead of making everything be spontaneous.
right. And so it's almost like this planned and authentic thing that you're like so worried about impressing the woman to get the validation
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
have it come from just being you because history has it that being you wasn't quite enough in
yeah.
your history
Right, or it needed to be changed. It needed to be
or
tweaked and
changed.
fine tuned.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, this is really, really important, actually, the connection here, because a lot of what it sounds like what stops you from just kind of being that fun loving goofy guy, and I know he's in there, to
yeah.
be honest, because we just demonstrated actually about 10 minutes ago. Like, you have that, but I think maybe you hold back in fear of dot dot dot, whatever that
Right.
is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I know we even talked a little bit about that on our first phone chat, and I've
Mhm.
gotten, I think I mentioned, I've gotten some similar feedback, about that from some people, some people who I've worked with closely, and who I know. And part of that, it definitely goes back to these situations I was just telling you about. And then I think, like I mentioned to you, some also a little bit from sometimes when I was more outgoing and just willing to let it all be out there, when I was younger, in my teens and 20s, that I went overboard. I just didn't know exactly how much to hold
Ah,
back and how much to give out. And that, in terms of being in relationships with people at that age, there's, that went overboard. And I ended up getting rejected in some very um painful ways at the time,
mm,
because I didn't know exactly where that balance was. And I think, unfortunately, that just reinforced my, initially just kind of staying away from the whole scene at all. And then
mhm.
even now, my sort of not being sure when to hold back and how to not hold back. But at least I feel like I'm more aware of that now, thanks
Yeah.
to you. I appreciate that.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's huge. And I talk about this often, and I call it the pendulum effect, like
Hmm.
you're one way and that's not working. And then what happens a lot of times is you overcompensate and
Yes.
overgeneralize to all the way at the other end of the spectrum. And
Yes.
then that doesn't work either. And so I just, like that awareness stage is huge because that's the first step to change. Quite honestly, I feel once you have that awareness and now you're in this state of recalibration, like how do you find the balance between the two? Because yeah, you don't want to do too much and you don't want to hold back either. So
Right.
it is kind of that thing in between. And but then the question becomes how,
Mm,
right? Like it's
definitely.
like, okay, well, I get this, but how? Like, what is the right balance? How do I go about it? So I want to get into that a little bit. If you maybe like just kind of picture you on a date and you said that like the typical thing sometimes ends up being where either it's boring, predictable, friend zoney, like what ends up happening? Kind of walk me through that.
That's a good question. What ends up happening, I would say a lot of times I will put myself under pressure to think of these sort of interesting questions or topics to bring up that are, that I think are, I want to get beyond. I don't want to sound like I'm interviewing. I don't want to get into, well, the basic, oh, where are you from? What do you do? How do you like your job? I don't,
Wah,
I
wah,
try to
wah.
get right, exactly. So, I
Yeah.
try to really just, from what I know about who I'm speaking with, maybe get a little bit beyond that, or just, if there happens to be, wherever we are, something, going on that I can talk about, or just something that we both know we're interested in, I try to talk about those things. I try to poke fun in a friendly way if there's a chance to do so. Um, and that, like I said, can it gets so far, but
Mhm.
a lot of times it just ends up with me being sort of draining myself, draining myself mentally and emotionally, and really not getting a lot of a response. Or when
Mhm.
the one time I did think I got a good response, I texted her the next day to say, hey, I had a really nice time, and then she said, yeah, I felt no chemistry, sorry. So
Ah, uh-huh. Okay.
so obviously, and
Yeah.
obviously, that's my side. That it depends on the person, and sometimes the person isn't just right, and it's better to know that always, and just
Right.
and just move on. But that's a very, in terms of recently, in the last
Mhm.
couple of years and the couple of dates I've gone on, that's been my kind of method of operation.
Hmm.
So at least it's like I'm through with the interview phase, which was what I would go back into when I was younger, and then
Mhm.
wonder why nothing came of it. But still, whenever I was trying to really get into that nice, playful, fun, spontaneous banter, it was either difficult or impossible, because I wasn't approaching it from an organic place. I think I was
Yeah.
putting myself under the spotlight and worrying about what it looked like.
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say that. So, let's get into some just like tangible things that you can
Hmm.
do because you're in such a good learning place and you're open. And I mean, Dustin, you have so many of the skills and the warmth and just the person that you are, that you literally can attract whoever you want. But I think it's not until you start getting more present
Yes.
with things and to make that more like authentic emotional connection rather than trying
Yes.
to
Yes.
have the
Exactly.
script to impress and the woman so that you get validated and it's like, oh, now I'm doing it right, now I'm doing it right. And so it's like
Right.
more kind of that mindset. And one of the things, I mean, I would say the first thing is don't think of topics that you're going to say. Like that's
Hmm.
probably the number one thing not to do. And I'm probably going against a lot of books that you read. A lot of people out there say, "Oh, get a
Good.
list
Please
of."
do, because it's
Yeah, I'm I kind of like I don't think that is right. When I have this whole formula that I teach people, and Dustin, you're in my how to date class, so you're going to get
Yes.
to experience that,
Yes.
and I'm going to teach it. It's called the social engagement formula, and what it is, just for you listening, it is the notion of how you can move conversations from your head into something that's more heart driven, personal, and emotional, and storytelling in nature. Because I believe that when you start thinking and prefabricating like topics, jokes, things that you're going to do going in, that's when the other person completely feels disconnected to you. Because what you might be doing is you're like dropping, like it's just like airdropping things from
Mm.
your and downloading them from your mind and it's like, oh wait, I gotta say this. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. But it has nothing to do with what you guys are even talking about, who the
No,
person
it's not
is.
present. It's not being present. It's not real. Or it's not. It's just not. There's nothing about that would generate an emotional connection, that really a feeling, as opposed to, it's like you were saying, it's you can't generate feeling from facts, and just giving these minute, boring details that could be from the back of your mind about something you've been storing. It has to be something real that develops as two people get to know each other.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to the example I was giving in the beginning about when that the two people went out on a date and they were talking about the
Yes.
rubber ducky. Now, they talked about that ducky for 20 minutes, maybe. Like I was timing it. And
Wow.
from that came other themes, right? But it was filled with the emotion of laughter, excitement, spontaneity within that, that at the end of the day, they both felt attracted to one another,
Wow.
despite them even knowing anything about anything.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And so I think, like, for you and for you listening, if you struggle with this, instead of worrying about also the struggle and of getting to know someone in a and on all the facts about them and on making sure that they know everything about you,
Mm,
what can you do walking into a date and say to yourself, okay, I'm just going to be, and this is a very simple tip, I'm going to go in and I'm going to just be curious.
mm. That's wonderful. I love that because the everything else will come if you get to know each other.
Mhm.
If there's if you if there's a real connection, a real attraction, emotional connection, I feel like all the interview fact and stuff and the stuff in the back of your mind will just come out in due time and not really influence the rest of it all that much. It's really just that feeling that you have to have when you're with somebody. After
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly, and what I love about curiosity too is it's something that kids have. Like, if you ever
Hmm.
watch 4 or 5-year-olds, they're awesome, like, they haven't developed filters yet, and
Oh, it's fantastic.
yeah, right, and they just, like, kinda go, "What are you doing?" You know?
Yes, yes,
I like your pail, can I play? Like, it's just this, like, innocent kind of curiosity, and because of that, you just feel so relaxed with them too, if you think about it.
definitely.
And if you, I would even recommend going to a playground and watching kids, like just being around that playfulness and curiosity that will help you tap into that part of you, because he is in there. And I think
Yeah.
that if you start thinking, well, and I'm this is almost an oxymoron, I'm like thinking about leading with your body, but it is like that. Like, it's more
Sure.
about the body energy that you bring to it, where it's more feeling based versus thought based and, memorizing lines and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
yeah, and even, coming into a date with a story of something that just happened to you, and break up the pattern of that, like, thing that always happens on dates. Hi, I'm Dustin. It's nice to meet you. So, how was your day? Da 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 da.
Right. Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if what I would like do if I were you is try to think back of all the dates and understand your cadence. Like, you could even write out the script of what normally happens,
Sure.
and then I want you to crinkle it up and just throw it away and say, you know what, next time I'm not going to say any of these things. And I'm just going to go in with how I'm feeling and share a story and see what comes out of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just something that's real, something that's just from, you know, the front of your thoughts in your mind at that time. And if it's really that, I think that will sort of guide itself, if when you're speaking with someone.
Yeah. Like, you want to do a little role playing?
Sure.
See, I'm being spontaneous with you.
There you go. There you go.
Get ready. Get ready. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Buckle up.
I see a cute little kitty cat in this picture on Zoom here. So I'm going to just have you share a story about your cat.
Okay.
Go for it.
Um, my cat is she is just such a little bundle of personality. And she has this thing where she will whenever I come back home from being out, she will greet me and immediately jump up onto my desk where I put my stuff down. Um, and she will look up, and I know that she's greeting me, and she's also really telling me, give me a cat treat right now. Like, you have a window to give me a cat treat.
Mhm.
And you better and you better give me a little kiss hello. But if you don't give me a kiss, if you don't give me the cat treat soon, if you try to give me a kiss hello, I'm gonna swat you. So so one time I was coming home from work, and it was late. It was a long day, and I just my mind wasn't with that particular rhythm that it should have been, and I dawdled a little bit too long, and then I went over to give her her treat, but I waited too long, and she reached up and swatted me in a very friendly way. She's not a mean
It was
cat,
a
but
friendly SWAT, yes.
yes, it was a friendly swat. But her claw got me just in such a place where there was just a tiny little mark. It wasn't bleeding. It was just a tiny little mark, and it was really interesting how for the next day or two, while it was still on my face, how I kind of had to explain to people. They would kind of be looking at it and wondering what was up with me, that I had this little thing. Like, was it, because it wasn't it didn't look like a shaving injury. It didn't. I'll just say that. It was like, okay, it was a, just like this weird little thing that's a cat swat, but you have to explain it. So I ended up explaining this story to a couple of people over the next couple of days, and it was just really funny to hear their reactions and see their faces. So
Okay, awesome. Awesome.
yeah,
I have some notes, but
okay.
how did that feel overall just telling that story?
It was nice. It was,
Yeah.
it was spontaneous. It was lighthearted. It was, there was a feeling of, positivity around it, and yeah,
Well, and can you imagine how much more powerful telling a story like that versus, so I have a cat,
right,
and then just like nothing. I have a cat.
right.
I
I've had
live
her since this
here.
day, and she's
I
black
had
and
that
white,
right.
and right.
Exactly. Exactly.
She's this many years old, and yeah,
Right. And so the thing that was missing for me, and this would be good homework for you, and I know
uh-huh.
we're going to be working on this in class, is that your storytelling is fantastic. And I got a lot of detail from it. I can even see
Okay.
the scratch on your face. Like you set the scene really well, and I could just
Sure.
see everything happening. But what was missing was what it meant to you,
Okay.
the
Okay.
feeling that got solicited from that cat experience. And so bringing
Okay.
that home in the story so that I could feel what that meant to you, that would be
Yeah,
a game changer in the way you told the story.
I really appreciate that. That's huge feedback. I really, that's incredible. You're right. I mean, because yeah, it was. I was telling it in a sort of a factual historical recount kind of way, which there's
Right.
nothing wrong with it, but it's not like it's not going to make you feel really emotionally connected with somebody hearing it that way. But just maybe adding a little bit of a maybe a little bit of a sentence here or there about the feeling that I had during that particular time. You're right, that could probably
And what
be
was that feeling?
just kind of I guess like playful adoration, you
Hmm.
know, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, can you imagine telling that story? And within the story, you're sharing your emotions about the experience. So, then the cat scratched me, and I was in pain, but then at the
Right.
same time, I kind of was. I found it humorous and laughing at this
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
And so then I'm feeling why you're telling the story. And I think this is really huge because it's one thing to just, say, oh, but I share a lot on dates and I share a story. But if someone's not feeling you in relation to the story because you're not
Right.
sharing that, that's where sometimes the attraction isn't there because
Yeah.
right, like because then the women aren't really feeling, or you're, it's like, why is this guy telling me the story?
Right. Like I could have just said, like, you know what, she reminded me who was boss, and and she reminded me who was boss, and I really just was reminded also how how uh how great I am, how great I feel when I walk in and see her, and she jumps up on that desk, because I was just so taken with it that I forgot to get her treats, and here I am with my scratch now. So
Yeah, and then taking it one step further about in the
uh-huh.
context of the date with the woman and saying, at first I was a little embarrassed that I had the scratch on my face, but I need to tell you where this came from.
Yeah,
Right. And then so that's more like how it's connected to the person in front of you. And then you're telling the story in relation to that. So it's like
right.
there's so much kind of powerful stuff and little things you can do that will make such a big difference. And I know you can do it, Dustin. And the other thing that I will say, in addition to, just working on your storytelling and your emotions, is I think we've talked about this before, but taking improv, I know you're
Mm,
doing voice lessons right now, and that's also a good thing because there's some exercises there. But doing any kind of acting or improv that can really help you express yourself more and be more spontaneous will
yes.
be awesome for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I've actually, you're so right. I've been I've been talking with that about that particular subject with, with some of the people I know from my voice training, and I know it would make me, probably ultimately would help my reads, help my actual reads that I do for work,
Yeah.
with, make them better quality too, because it's about that spontaneity.
It's the spontaneity and expressing yourself,
Yes.
and without worrying about what's gonna happen next. I think that's really important to you, and knowing that the funniest things that happen in life are ones where you fail. And you're fearful of
Mm,
failure and rejection, but actually what makes you the most attractive is when you fail and you recognize it and you
yeah,
own it. Right?
yeah,
Like, and so the funniest improv scenes are ones where they fail miserably because it's hilarious, like,
exactly.
and there's a lot of beats that come from that. And the fourth tip that I'll give you is that I I would love for you to plan spontaneous time for yourself. So pick a
Okay.
day in the week where you're saying, I know, again, an oxymoron, but
Right, schedule
you
the spontaneity, but no,
schedule spontaneity,
but
right?
it makes a lot of, you have to make the time because we're all so overbooked as it is, and yeah, if you
Well,
don't
and
do it, you're not going to do it.
your go-to thing is to, be a little more controlled and, patterned. So if you schedule a time where you are not in your pattern, that you are more
Yes.
spontaneous, and whatever that looks like, great. So every Sunday you're going to do something different from 12 to 2. I think that'll help you also with some of that boredom that it
Mm,
feels like for yourself.
yeah, completely.
Oh my God, Dust, I can go on and on with you, but thank
Yeah.
goodness you're in my class so that I get to see you
Yes.
more. And
Yes.
how are you feeling? Any like takeaways that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, this is all just so tremendously valuable. I mean, I can't even believe how quickly the past, like, 30, 40 minutes have gone by. It's amazing. But, it's truly wonderful to, I can take so much away from these kinds of conversations because, like I said, it's constructive. I want to, I want to understand where I need to change and what, specifically I need to look at to make a better, just show a better version of myself, like you said, that I know we both know is back there. Um, and it's exactly the kind of thing that we just did and talked about, the things we just talked about, and the role playing that help point out how you can do that.
Yeah. Oh, Dustin, well, I'm excited for you. I think it's just the
Thank you.
beginning stages for you. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything. I know you've
Pleasure.
helped a lot of people today too.
I hope so.
So thanks for joining me today. This has been the Charisma Quotient. I'm your host, of course, Kimmy Seltzer. And remember, you can build confidence, make connections, and find love from the outside in. And make sure you go to my site, kimmyseltzer.com. And if you are finding yourself being caught in the friend zone with boring interactions and don't know how to get out of that pattern, then click the link you see in the show notes and book a call with me to see if I can help you map out a plan to get into the fun zone. And remember, it starts with you, and working on yourself is working on your dating life. That's all for now.